The market reacted after Judge Torres denied two very specific petitions made by Ripple and the SEC, sort of. I'd want to discuss that a little, for separate lawyers in the XRP community have given me their opinions. That would include lawyers Fred Rispoli, James Murphy, John Deaton, and Bill Morgan. Therefore, you should pay attention to what they have to say here. For those who haven't been keeping up, I'll state right away that you shouldn't be concerned about this. This has no bearing whatsoever on XRP's legal standing. As XRP holders, we remain as fortunate as we were on XRP Victory Day, which took place over 2 years ago. Judge Torres gave XRP holders the legal clarification they had been seeking for several years prior. I do want to be clear, though, before continuing, I have no financial experience. I'm not giving financial advice, and whatever I say or write should not lead you to buy or sell anything. I'm merely a hobbyist who likes to create YouTube videos about crypto-related subjects for enjoyment. Okay, so it is 6:52 p.m. at the moment I am filming this video, Central Time. The price of XRP is $2.10 on Thursday, June 26, 2025. To the best of my knowledge, the first time this news was shared was at 8:15 a.m. with XRP community attorney James K. Fillon. He merely tweeted, "Breaking, Judge Torres has denied the party's motion for an indicative ruling in Central Time, which is also my time zone there." I witnessed that event, and a few hours later, I was merely taking in the market's activities. Actually, it was sort of interesting because the market was already declining a little when XRP did, though it's difficult to say for sure. Indeed, it is possible that the market reacted to the news that broke here, but it was only a slight reaction. Additionally, the market was already moving in this direction, so the steepness of the decline didn't really increase as a result of the news, which is not usually the case in the past. The price of XRP would either drop to the minute, as if it were falling off a cliff, or it would rise vertically to the minute if the news was good. The market did react, but we didn't receive any of those here. Obviously, we would have just received one negative if something had presented itself. So, here's what I had to say. The time is 2:44 p.m. We had some opportunity to see how the market was interpreting price activity this afternoon. This is the XRP price chart for the previous 24 hours, along with what I posted on X. The price of XRP was slightly above $2.15 this morning when the Judge Torres Ripple/SEC news emerged. The market dropped off marginally to a price just above $2.09 as the news broke. That's a mere 2.7% decrease in price. The price started to drop around 8:15 a.m. Central Time until approximately 11:50 a.m. when it reached its lowest point, Central Time. I'll just pause here to say that I believe the last time we witnessed any negative price activity right after news broke that was related to this was when the SEC made a public announcement that they would be appealing Judge Torres' ruling. Subsequently, you witnessed a 5% decline in the price of XRP down to the minute. You witnessed a very sharp decline, even though it was very little and occurred over around 90 minutes. You would have seen that it went off like a cliff rather than declining gradually, as it is now on your computer, if you were looking at a price chart, a 24-hour chart, in that instant, living in that moment. Like I have a 24-hour chart on the screen right now. Although it was only a minor proportion, it visually appeared to have fallen over a cliff. After that, it slightly increased again, but the market didn't care, and as a result of the news, it never fell any lower because everyone in the market realized it didn't matter. So, I'm admitting that the price did drop after this, and it's a major factor in what I'm referencing. I'm not sure if that's the only reason, if there is one at all. I'm only pointing out that it was already declining and that it kept declining without getting steeper, correct? Because, in my opinion, nobody cares. Visually, it doesn't even appear as though price snapped at a specific time, I wrote. It doesn't appear to have fallen from a cliff. View the screen capture. This suggests that holders of XRP were not in a panic. No crowds of people were rushing to sell. As far as I can remember, this is actually the least noticeable selling point in history for any alleged bad news pertaining to this issue. The price of XRP increased slightly to $2.12 in the approximately 3 hours that followed. This indicates that nearly all XRP holders are aware that the news has little bearing on XRP in and of itself. To put it briefly, XRP holders are indifferent. Thus, once more, you may debate. Okay, I won't call you insane if you want to claim that the news had some influence on this. Once more, why didn't the steepness rise? So I'm not entirely sure. It was already going down because it simply kept going down at the pitch. Consider it for what it is. Zach Richter, a prominent member of the XRP community, also commented, "Unfortunate XRP case news just turned the whole market red." Although some people continue to dispute that XRP is experiencing a bull run. Then, lawyer Morgan just so happened to mention that. With all due respect, I disagree with it. Since the market was already modestly declining when the news broke, I responded by disputing his allegation in my letter. I also looked at other popular coins. The other 10 most valuable coins essentially moved in unison. However, the XRP price chart is indeed visually very different. I'm not sure if it's worthwhile to provide too many instances at this time. However, some of the coins are visible, as if they were easy to identify. Ethereum's 24-hour chart is shown here. It is more likely to coincide with some of these other charts. In essence, what I'm saying is that, generally speaking, the market was moving in unison. To be honest, certain high-quality coins may have slightly distinct appearances. What you can't find, though, is that everything went down the minute the XRP news broke. That assertion is untrue. Zach Richter is wrong when he says something didn't occur. As you can see from the graphic, the market as a whole was already going downward. Thus, just a few of these are visible to you. You may view what some of these 24-hour charts currently look like if you would like to look at them, as if the market were acting in the same way. While some did better than others, many of these charts have a similar appearance, don't they? Do you understand what I'm referring to there? Now, there have been times when XRP has experienced an event that has subsequently influenced market events. There are extremely few cases of that. They are then transient. The clearest example that comes to mind is when XRP gained legal certainty and the price of Bitcoin instantly followed suit. However, that did not last long. In light of that, what do you think about the fact that XRP is seeing a bull run? Not at all. Look, since the election, XRP has outperformed the other 100 coins by market capitalization. It's accurate. It's also my largest individual holding, which makes me very thrilled. The market leader is Bitcoin. After it leaves, altcoins like XRP follow. I simply want to live in reality, and that is not the case at all with XRP. I'm prejudiced, but my favorite coin is XRP. But it's obvious that what he's stating there is untrue. I'm just stating that. Okay, therefore, look at this. This is a crucial section. This is what transpired. And this is Judge Torres' 5-page paper. I don't have to read this entire thing. I don't want to elaborate. I just want to convey the main points to you. However, I would like to post the top portion here. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the plaintiff, and defendant Ripple Labs requested that the court declare that it would, among other things, revoke the court's permanent injunction requiring Ripple to abide by the law and, second, reduce the monetary penalty imposed on Ripple by more than half. Therefore, we are discussing reducing the penalty from the $125 million that Judge Torres stated was required to be paid to $50 million. Here, she said no. That's the meaning of that. Additionally, she refused to lift the permanent order, which would have affected Ripple's ability to sell XRP, in particular, to institutions rather than on the programmatic or trading side. So, neither you nor I is affected by it. There is no doubt that we are safe. Therefore, you don't need to be concerned about that. Workarounds have been in place ever since this injunction was put into effect. Ripple. One of the workarounds here is the use of Rust if you're discussing on-demand liquidity, using XRP as a bridge currency. Though it is a distinct asset, the good news is that if you are referring to that on the XRP ledger, it does require XRP. Following the news, Ripple's chief legal officer, Stuart Alderete, stated this morning, "With this, the ball is back in our court. The court offered us two choices, either drop our appeal and contest the historic institutional sales conclusion, or proceed with the case. Keep an eye out. In any case, XRP's legal classification as a non-security has not altered. Meanwhile, everything is going according to plan. Since Ripple had $3.7 billion in cash when they last made a public announcement, I don't think they worry as much about the money. Like $3.7 billion, I'm not kidding. It's not that they don't give a damn, then. Simply put, this won't have a significant effect on their business. Since the injunction affects their ability to conduct business going forward, they most likely care more about it than anything else. That seems like a source of annoyance. They are then hamstrung in a manner that is different from that of their rivals. That's hardly perfect, then, is it? And then this. This is from Bill Morgan, an attorney. He reposted Stuart Alderete's post that I just shared with you. He added that the appeals are on hold until the middle of August and that Ripple is still open to the possibility of pursuing its cross-appeal on institutional sales. Ripple has plenty of time to think about its alternatives. Therefore, that is accurate. Here, they might go anyway. In my opinion, the majority of lawyers who are openly discussing this are merely interested in getting this matter resolved, even if it means keeping the injunction in place. There are explanations for this. Let me start by sharing this post from Eleanor Tarrant, a former journalist for Fox Business. No, Judge Torres' message in the ruling is that private deals won't erase public judgments, she said, adding that the public interest is still served by her decision. Quote, "It is not within the parties' power to consent to avoid being bound by the court's final ruling." End quote. They haven't even come close to doing so here. People, that means that Judge Torres says no if they want to change anything else. That's very unfortunate. Then she writes that they can either go through the appeals procedure to fight the judgment or withdraw their petitions and let it remain if they so want. Therefore, that is the true location. Following the news this morning, John Deaton wrote this post. "I can't say I'm shocked, but I did think she would eventually grant the indicative ruling," he added. He then posted a video of himself from before today, before the decision was made. In this video clip, he was elaborating on why Judge Torres might not be inclined to lift the injunction against Ripple and lower the punishment. To be honest, the SEC and Ripple did not make a compelling enough argument for her to do so. And frankly, that's an observation that I saw from pretty much every analyst within the XRP, or I'm just saying, analyst, every lawyer within the XRP community. Concerns were expressed, and that's when they, you may recall, added on a little memorandum. That's when a couple of attorneys were like, okay, well, maybe that'll be to push this thing over the edge and to get Judge Torres to be like, okay, we'll move the injunction and so forth. Turns out the answer was no, sadly. But it looks like Ripple realized they needed to try to edge more in that direction. It just wasn't enough, though. Here's a post from attorney James Murphy. He says, Judge Torres' decision not to vacate her prior ruling in the Ripple case is not a surprise. I expect the SEC and Ripple will nevertheless settle and dismiss their respective appeals. Well, that would be nice. For the 5 or 6 of you out there who actually think that this matters for XRP, I'd rather just have it done so that we don't have to worry about this anymore. There's not even a clamor about this potentially impacting markets. Now, I do acknowledge that if you get good news like that, even though it doesn't impact XRP directly, especially for in a state of euphoria, the market could respond. And an example of this that I keep providing is when Gary Gensler announced on, I think it was November 21st last year, that he would resign. That had nothing to do with XRP itself. The price of XRP rocketed down by the minute. So markets, if they're in a state of excitement, especially, can set something off. But I'm just insisting it's ultimately not going to matter. If it's not that, do you think that if Gensler didn't resign, XRP just wouldn't have pumped? Come on. It would have just gone at a different point, and they could have been triggered by something else, but it just would have gone. And then there was this from attorney Murphy. Note, the SEC and Ripple do not need permission from any court to dismiss their appeals. My guess is we will see dismissals of both appeals soon because the lawyers for both sides had to have anticipated this outcome, that Judge Torres would not vacate her prior ruling. And then here's a post from XRP Union member Sherry, and she wrote, if the parties drop their appeals and bring the case back to her to reduce the fine and absolve Ripple's injunction, she will deny them. Now, both Ripple and the SEC need to decide whether to just accept her judgment and drop the appeals or continue the lawsuit. And then there was this rather long post from attorney Fred Rispoli in printed form. It would be quite the tome, and I've got to tell you, it's a fantastic write-up. He did say one thing that caught me off guard, and I asked him a question, and it was right before I started recording this, though, so I don't know if there's an answer for it yet, and I might just be misunderstanding something. But where he was coming from and his insight here are pretty damn level-headed and make sense, easy to understand here. And for the sake of time, like, if you see, and you can pause it if you want to read this whole thing, it is kind of lengthy. So for the sake of time, I won't read the whole thing here. But he was basically saying, like, same old as it pertains to the SEC. Now, I get what he means by that because he went back and he cited, basically going decades back, the disgusting behavior from the SEC, even under, George W. Bush. And he cited specific examples. That may very well be true. I'm not going to opine on that. I haven't looked in depth into historically all of the terrible things that the SEC may have done. But I lived through the stuff with what's happened under Kim Jong-un and Jay Clayton, and who preceded him, of course. And I just have to say, one thing is very obviously different. With Paul Atkins in charge, the war on crypto is over. That is what has been decreed from the very top of this new administration, from Trump on down. So that is indeed the case. So that part is different. But in terms of doing things that attorney Raspoli would probably argue would have been the right things, maybe they're not still doing that. And so there are a couple of things that he cited here. First of all, it would have been a good idea to get some heavy hitters to come in and argue the points that needed to be made to persuade Judge Torres, okay, yeah, it should have been changed. Like he cited here, for instance, getting Esther Pierce to come in. She's, of course, an SEC commissioner. Additionally, having the SEC chair, the new chair, Paul Atkins, come in and say, yes, we were on the wrong path under the previous administration, and so on. Just kind of paraphrasing there. Those are the types of things that maybe would have been enough to get Judge Torres to rule differently than she did. Now, part of what he ends up theorizing about, which I think is pretty damn reasonable, is that the SEC just really didn't want to fall on the sword. And that's, it's on your screen right here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, like I said, but it's that type of argument, which could be true. So even though they're happy to say, yeah, we were on the wrong path, which Paul Atkins has said, regarding crypto several times, that's one thing. But then, saying, yeah, this institution has been complete and utter garbage, and throwing even the entire foundation of the institution under the bus, they're not willing to go far enough to get to that point. So interesting thoughts here. And I think that that's, from what I read, it just seemed like that's a big part of why he's like, same old SEC. And I get the point he's making. But good news here, he did also cite that, here you go, as you wrote here, regarding that injunction, that'd be the one impacting where Ripple can, how Ripple can sell their XRP specifically to institutions, saying regarding that injunction, it doesn't affect XRP on the secondary market, nor will it impact XRP ETF approvals. So we're still going. As far as what matters to you and me as XRP holders, we are just fine here, folks. We are absolutely just fine here. This is not a problem whatsoever. I will read this last little bit, though. It says, further, Ripple has already claimed that it has changed its operations such that the behavior it got tagged for by TORs is no more, meaning how they're selling their XRP. It says, if you look at the Stuart Alvarade post on this ruling from today, I noticed for the first time he used the term historic institutional sales to describe the Torres' determined bad behavior. Maybe he used it before, but I didn't notice it. Anyway, this signals to me that the parties are going to settle and move on with the understanding that XRP sales to institutions will be done in a way the SEC can live with. So that would be nice. And some attorneys have said, yeah, I think that it's probably going to go away still. So that would be rather nice here. The one thing where I was scratching my head a little bit, and it could be my fault, maybe I just didn't understand something right here. He said, the parties will drop their appeals. This is a prediction. The parties will drop their appeals, settle at $50 million, and move on with the injunction in place. So they don't drop the injunction, but they're going to settle, and then the fine does get dropped. I don't get that. And it could. Look, I'm not an attorney. Maybe I'm actually misunderstanding something. I'm not a know-it-all. So if I don't know something, I'm not going to come on here and pretend like I know the answer when I don't. I'm just going to say, I don't know. And so I don't know why he's saying that when everything else I've read, including from Judge Torres right here in this first paragraph that I just read to you, it's cited here. Dissolved the court's permanent injunction and then cut the monetary penalty imposed on Ripple by more than half and said the request is denied. So, refused to do that. So then, if she refused to allow that, how, then, can Ripple and the SEC just agree to do it? I don't have the answer to that. So maybe there's a simple answer, or I misinterpreted him. That's possible. But at this moment, I don't know. Either way, everything's fine. Subscribe to our channel.